All
All
right,
right,
hello
hello
everybody.
everybody.
Want to
Want to
thank
thank
everybody
everybody
for
for
joining us for our monthly mental health ministry conversation. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, I ask that you go ahead and share the post. We would be extremely appreciative. Again, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, ask that you share the post. Also, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, if you'd like to join in the verbal conversation, click pin to the top of the comments. You'll see a Zoom link. You can click that link and come on in and join in the verbal. But we'll try our best to pay attention to what the questions or the comments that are going on in the chat. Want to introduce to you, present to you, the coordinator of our mental health ministry, Brother John Park.
Hello, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well.
Hello.
I was trying to get my lighting right with these braids back here. Look like I got a seven head, so I'm a little embarrassed today, but I'm working it out. It's all good. All right. Well, today we wanted to talk about a specific topic about managing expectations. A couple months back, we had a conversation where we were talking about dealing with disappointment and people when they disappoint you and disappointing things and things of that nature. And so today I wanted to kind of dovetail into like a secondary topic that kind of deals with disappointment and or to bring about disappointment. And that's why I wanted to talk today about managing expectations as a pathway to mental well-being. We can go to the next slide. And so, more specifically, when we're talking about expectations and managing expectations, we want to understand and define personal and external expectations, which serve as a foundation for mental well-being. It aids and aligns, excuse me, it aids in aligning with goals, aligning goals with reality. And so, oftentimes, when I'm having discussions with people, a lot of frustrations that they have are based around um, wrong expectations, bad expectations, misplaced expectations, and things of that nature. And people don't understand sometimes um, how much a role or how large a role expectation plays in our relationships with ourselves, with others, with God, and so on. And so I just wanted to have a chat about that. And this again, just describing mental well-being. And for our purposes of our conversation, mental well-being will encompass emotional, psychological, and social aspects that are critical for decision making, stress management, and overall happiness. So, bottom line, if our mental well-being is off, it can affect our psychological state. It can affect our social aspects and how we deal with other people. It can affect our decision making, the ways in which we manage our stress, and our overall happiness. And so there's a link that I want to draw between expectations and our well being. Any questions so far?
No, sir.
All right. Okay. We can move on to the next thing then. And so again, why do we want to talk about expectations? And so the reason why is because the way in which we go about our days and the way in which we live our lives, our expectations of things can impact our daily life. Expectations shape our thoughts, shapes our feelings, and it shapes our action. And when our expectations are realistic, they motivate us. But when they're too high or too low, they can lead to disappointment, they can lead to stress, or even anxiety and depression. We'll talk about that later. And expectations are part of life. You know, we carry them for ourselves, for others, and even for God. And the role that expectations play in our daily life can sometimes be again minimized or not even known or paid attention to. So again, I think that's why we need to really have this discussion today. All right, and so we'll move on to what are expectations. Expectations are beliefs about how things should be. They can be about ourselves, so we can have expectations for ourselves, like I should always be strong, or I should always be happy, or I should always be available to people when they need me. It can be for others. People should never let me down. People should always be right by me. And then in situations, we have expectations about situations, like life should be fair. I hear that a lot from my kids as they're trying to learn how to navigate the world. Um, this is not fair, that is not fair. You know, as parents, we have to help them understand that life is not fair, but we also have to um, set them up in such a way that they understand what those expectations for life being fair can mean. And oftentimes, I think we don't have enough conversations with children, especially because we just expect them to just get in line and understand that life isn't fair. But for them, when life ain't fair, it could be something simple as, they got two pieces of orange slice and I got one orange slice, and meltdown happens, right? And so unfortunately that happens for adults as well. And so when you don't learn how to manage your expectation, understand that the life ain't fair as a young person, it can manifest in your adult life. And so again, I think it's a good conversation to have. And also the way in which our expectations can be shaped. They can be shaped by personal experiences, relational experiences, or they can be shaped by society. And oftentimes they can get shaped without us even realizing. Any questions there? Any questions, comments, concerns?
So, who determines
Mhm.
whether expectations are attainable or realistic?
We'll get into that. It's an excellent question. I think oftentimes, in the purpose of understanding like mental health and well-being and expectations, I think well, I shouldn't say I think, how you are responding to the expectations that you have for yourself, for others, for God, or whatever the case may be, will indicate to you whether or not your expectations are good or healthy, or along those lines. That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So to a certain extent, um, because I think personality. I mean, I don't. I think it's just a. I think it's a real fine line that you have to walk because I think it's kind of dangerous too to have extra expectations that are too low.
Hmm.
But I'm sure you'll clear it all up for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If I don't, please, stay on me. But no, I think 100% it is definitely um, either extreme. Like, and that's, I think, the thing with mental health, especially, or just well-being overall, is when we're too high, too low on anything, especially with expectation for people or ourselves or whatever. Um, it can lead to us not being in the most optimal health. And so I'm 100% agree once with you that if our expectations are too low, and it's different. Like if we're talking about expectations for like our children or our spouse or people, our coworkers, if we have low expectations for them, so that they, when they do achieve or do the right thing, we're happy. That's one thing. But if we just have general low expectations for people just because we've been disappointed in life, or people have let us down a lot, or we've learned not to trust people, then that's a different situation than if our expectations are low there. But does that make sense? Just in terms of those two different scenarios where expectations could be low.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, but we'll jump in on it. What you're talking about still. Okay, and so for the next slide, we're talking about where do expectations come from. And in general, our expectations come from our families, the culture we live in, the environment we live in. It can come from our faith and past experiences. And sometimes we can develop expectation for what we think others want from us, including the church, including our mom and dad, including our school teachers, including our brothers and sisters. There's a lot of ways in which we go about our lives, gathering all these tidbits and ways in which we develop our expectations. And so, what I wanted to do for you all that are here, anybody that's willing, I wanted to get examples from maybe one of the categories. For instance, like our families. What was your expectation, if you're married or even if you're dating, what is your expectation, or what did you learn about gender roles in your family, just for one particular topic, in terms of expectations? If you're getting married or dating someone, what did your family teach you about gender roles? What's the expectations that you have for gender roles?
I don't know if my family taught it to me, but just I think the way that Michonne and I and our family operated, but specifically Michonne and I, um, our expectations was that whatever our strengths were, that 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 we use those strengths to make sure that our household ran smooth. And so if one had strength of finances, one had organizational skills, we're not sure, it's going to be her or me, but whoever has that strength, to use that strength to make sure that our house ran smooth.
I like it.
Um, you said what are expectations on gender roles?
Yeah, like what did you learn? So we're talking about expectations, and I was specifically saying, hey, we can learn expectations from our families, our families of origin. So just asking, like, hey, did you learn or did you have any expectations that you got in growing up in your household?
Um, yeah, I guess one expectation I feel like was just kind of like it came from just circumstance, natural. So, I can breastfeed. My husband cannot breastfeed, so the expectation to feed the baby was obviously on me.
Hmm.
And so I kind of have, when our children are little babies, I kind of have a greater role, and I'm like more on the responsible side for, taking care of them, if they're sick or different things like that, and just like more of that. Um, and then growing up, I never mowed a lawn before. So then when I got married, it was of my expectation that like my husband or yard service would mow the lawn because I've just never done it before. I don't even know how. Um, so yeah. And then me and Cody, when we were at the marriage retreat last year, we really got a lot of peace about our expectations from the exercise of building that house. Because we both just kind of like naturally did what we were gifted at, and it helped us to learn to appreciate one another, because we do different things, but realizing the value in the differences, and then just appreciating each person like operating in their strength as opposed to like um me trying to do something that's really hard for me to do when Cody could have done that way easier, and vice versa. Like, so I mainly manage like the budgeting and finances. And then Cody, he manages like fixing, building, like, oil changes, house maintenance. If something breaks, he fixes it. Because it takes me like 2 hours to build the simplest thing, and Cody can build it like way faster. So just, I guess, back to what my dad was saying, is using those strengths as well, and just kind of like leaning towards that for expectation.
I think those are great examples, very great examples in terms of expectations. I did want to, you mentioned the breastfeeding, and it reminds me of several people that I've counseled, couples, during the phase of, especially when they had their first child. And I've heard a few times that, hey, the expectation was initially that if they were pumping, the wife would pump, and then they switch off days because there'd be milk where somebody could sleep, somebody could stay, could alternate sleep patterns if there was enough milk. And then sometimes when there isn't enough milk, I've heard the expectation for the husband is like, hey, well, even though you can't necessarily feed the baby right now, I have an expectation for you to be awake with me while I'm nursing, so that we both can be, having that experience together. I'm not saying that this is what I heard from you. I'm just saying that it's been interesting to me that I've been in several situations where the expectation, and we didn't really talk about it, but the expectation for the husband, even though the husband couldn't actively participate in the breastfeeding, was expected to stay awake with the wife while she breastfed as opposed to sleeping. And so those are the examples of, again, I didn't have those specific conversations with the people to figure out where those expectations come from, because that wasn't the point of our conversation. But that's another example, because you mentioned that, like, oh, these are expectations. Who knows where they come from? But it's very interesting that that would be an expectation. Kiara, I see your hand too.
Yeah, look, um, I used to be so mad looking at Cody sleep while I was up breastfeeding. I was like, oh man, I know he ain't just sleeping peacefully. Like, this ain't right. I used to be real mad about it, but now I'm learning to communicate and let Cody know, like, hey, I'm tired. I didn't, cause he just, if he go to sleep and then he wake up, if he see me sleep when he wake up, he just think maybe I slept through the night too. So I'm learning to communicate and let him know, hey, I didn't get no sleep. So just,
Yeah.
just so you know. So yeah, I've been learning to communicate, because sometimes I used to just kind of expect Cody to know that I was so tired, And
Hmm.
now I'm like, no, I'm not going to expect him to know. But I am going to tell him, and I'm going to let him know when I need help and when I'm really tired during the day. But I
That's
usually
perfect. And I
give
promise you, I
you
never. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And me and Cody never had this conversation. I don't want you fussing at him about, hey, why you talking about our business? But no, it's a common theme. I think that happens a lot. And I think that is an example of like, hey, and we'll talk about it later, how communication plays a part in expectations. But it's just funny to see it. Oftentimes we'll have such big arguments as couples or as families or as people dating or just friends. Sometimes too, and expectations. I was doing something today and I heard a story about a gentleman was trying to explain to people why you should always bring something to someone's house when they invite you over. And his point was, hey, if someone invites you over, for an event at their house, whatever the case may be, don't come empty-handed. You don't have to, buy something really expensive or whatever the case may be. But the idea was that you needed to, put in for whatever the case may be. And the comments were just full of like, well, you shouldn't throw a party if you're poor, or you shouldn't expect people to come over if, just all these different things where you can see the division of like some people that was like home training. Home training tells you to bring something over. And the people say home training tells you, don't throw a party if you can't afford to have the people come. So it was just interesting to see that split of people's perspectives and expectations for what you're supposed to do when you have a party. I definitely thought it was funny that people say you're poor if you can't if you can't afford to throw a party and not have people bring stuff. But I just think the idea is like it goes back, hey, somewhere, somehow down the line, the person that was started the conversation was trained, was taught, and they had the expectation to hey, bring something to an event, especially a house party or house gathering, whatever the case may be, because it's nice for you to do that. And everybody didn't have that experience. So you can imagine if you're in a household with somebody that has an expectation like that, and every time you go somewhere, you come empty-handed, and that person gonna be like, "Man, we always come to these parties with no gifts. Like it makes me look bad, or da 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 da, makes the family look bad." And so it just we'll talk about it more, but I think that more often than not, again, friendships, relationships, even coworker situations, due to people's expectations not being communicated, it can lead to problems. And again, where do the expectations come from? Could be family, could be culture, could be faith, could be our past experiences. And Kira, is your hand still up, or it just didn't go down?
Yeah, you made me think of something. There was a lady who had a baby shower, and
Hmm.
she told everybody who didn't bring a gift that they needed to go home. And like
Wow.
there was this big debate about like, should you come to the wedding or the baby shower or whatever if you don't have a gift? There's like this big debate. And ever since that happened, whenever I invite people to like my children's birthday party, I always like reassure them like, hey, come. Like if you can bring a gift and you want to do that, but don't feel obligated to, we're just here to celebrate and enjoy time together. So I always put an emphasis on how the gifts are not necessary. And then I have a conversation with my kids as well, teaching them to just love people and appreciate your friends spending time with you. And that you never know what people are going through, if they're in a financially tough situation and or whatever the case may be, and you don't want to put that requirement on them. Because I would hate for somebody to sacrifice bringing a gift for me and they're struggling trying to pay their rent or something like that. So that it's a really interesting. People get real serious about it, and I'm like, look, I don't care if you bring a gift or not. Like you're my friend. I invited you because I just wanted your presence, not you to bring a present. But if you do, I'll gladly receive it.
And I think that's a great example of how expectations can be stingers, for people. It's like you're like, hey, it's not a big deal. Come on, we just want to have some time with you. Other people are like, hey, if you come empty-handed, you might as well just return home. So it's there's some pain there somewhere. There's some trauma. There's something going on that people will turn you away for that. But that's just people's real life experiences. Um, any other comments, questions, concerns on that slide? Okay, okay, we can move ahead. And so this may not again, Reverend Ross, if I don't hit it in this, we can talk about it later or whenever. But there's healthy versus unhealthy expectations. And we kind of mentioned before, having low expectations, too high of expectations, those can definitely be unhealthy expectations. But in general, we're talking about very general, generally speaking, healthy expectations are flexible, they're realistic, and they're compassionate. And what I mean by that is if you have an expectation that's flexible, you generally get less bent out of shape when that expectation isn't met. Now, this is different when you're saying, hey, you have a deadline for work, or a kid needs to go to a doctor's appointment and it's the only one we can get for 3 months. There's different things, and you expect that person that said they were going to take the kid to get there on time, or if you again were expecting for somebody to bring the roast beef to the potluck and they didn't bring the roast beef, and now you got to scramble to figure out something else. But generally, if we're talking about plans or expectations for somebody, if they're very if they're not flexible, when somebody doesn't meet your expectation, it's going to lead to some type of issue for you. And then realistic. Sometimes we have expectations for people that are unrealistic. Um, for me, and this is more funny than anything. I'm at an age where when people want me to go out past a certain time, I'm just not going to be able to make it, and I have to be realistic. Hey, I know you want me to show up, and you want to have a good time, but sir, every minute I'm up past 11:30 at night, I'll become a pumpkin. I guarantee you. It'd be like Cinderella or whoever it was. Like I just don't have it in me no more. There was a point in time where I could do that. And so my friends, when we go somewhere or when we're out, hey, expectation, if their expectations for me to stay up past 11:30, it's not gonna happen. So realistically, I had to let people know I just can't do it. Please, hey, y'all have to go on without me. But being funny, but in real life, we want to have realistic expectations that people can actually meet. Otherwise, it may lead to some kind of discomfort for us. And compassionate. If we have expectations, say we have a child that can't read very well, and then we put them in front of their their class or in front of the family that's come over and expect them and ask them to read, that's not very compassionate. The child can't read very good, and you want to just show your babies talents, and if they can't really do it, that's not very compassionate. Hopefully that's not too terrible of an example, but when we have expectations for people to do stuff and compassion doesn't rule those expectations, we can, it can lead to negative relationships and distress. And then unhealthy expectations are very rigid. Again, you can have expectations that can be rigid because you can have expectations for people that are based in that are flexible, realistic, or compassionate. But generally, if you walk around as a person who has all these expectations for other people, for social relationships, for work, for this, for that, and they're very, very, very rigid, and there's no flexibility, and then there's a room, it could lead to discomfort, it could lead to distress, it could lead to a mental health diagnosis, all different types of things. And again, there's good rigid and then there's unhealthy rigid, to an extent. But rigid in general is not what you want to be. And then perfectionistic is what we'll talk about perfection later on. When you have perfectionistic expectations for people or situations or things, it can be unhealthy and then based on fear. When we have expectations for ourselves, for others that are based in fear, those are definitely unhealthy expectations. You want your expectations to be flexible and achievable. And then sometimes when you have rigid expectations or other unhealthy expectations, they're not based in reality. Some people just can't do certain things. If you have expectations for them to do that, it may not lead to good things and happiness and all of that good stuff. Any questions there?
Yeah. So I
Hmm.
guess that's why I'm not a good candidate for mental health therapy. Um, if I I agree that it's necessary. That's why we have it in our ministry, and we've had it for over almost we have it over 4 years now. But I guess I'm just not a good candidate. Um, I the I don't know. I guess I think I just think I know what I know. So like let's say flexible. Let's say somebody works for me, and
Hmm.
I expect them to be on time. Say I'm running a business and I expect them to be on time. Um, Not really flexible. You get a couple excuses, but if it but just not really flexible for all the you know the just the things that always seems to happen. Um, and then even with my with myself, just being rigid. There if it needs to be done, it's got to be done.
Hmm.
If I don't do it, who's gonna do it?
Hmm.
And so where everything you're saying, I think is good, but I just don't know if I'm a good candidate for mental health therapy.
Those two things will not discredit you or disqualify you from being a candidate for mental health therapy. And again, being flexible with somebody being late when you're paying them, no sir, we're not doing that. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, like you said, you might get one or two opportunities to not show up on time, but that's an area where there's work expectations versus like personal expectations. So forget this, we're talking about time, right? So I've been on the continent of Africa, and I've lived here in America, and I've been around people that look like us a lot. And CPT is a real thing. Color people time, whatever you want to call it. They have a thing in Africa. TIA. This is Africa. So you sit down for a meal. Sometimes you got to tell people. They say, what do they say? 4:30 for five, meaning like we want to get started at 5, but we tell people 4:30 because we know people aren't going to show up till 5. So they already have the expectation in the invitation that, hey, we know people are going to be late. So I'm going to be flexible in that situation and not get upset when people don't show up at a certain time. Now, again, work flexible is a lot different than party or hangout flexible. So you're okay, sir. Like, I feel like that expectation for somebody to be on time to work is great. And the idea with the rigidness is like, um, you think of a board. A board is rigid. A board is stiff. A board is hard. It doesn't bend very easy. You know what I mean? But you can be rigid and be malleable. Maybe you can be like metal. Metal, if you warm it up to a certain temperature, it can bend a little bit. You can shape and mold it. You know what I mean? It can get soft and do what it needs to do, and then it get hard again, and it can be perfectly used for whatever you want to use it for. So there's hope. There's always hope for rigidness. It's just a matter if you find out that your rigidness uh causes a deficiency in your life, or if it causes like breaks in personal relationships that don't necessarily have to be there, right? So there's room to be, inflexible to an extent. There's room to be rigid in an extent. But I guarantee you, sir, like as we talk about it a little bit more, you'll get to see if your rigidness is causing no one around you to like you. And I think people generally like you from what I can see. Then we can say that, hey, man, maybe your expectations or something you got going on, your rigidness there is a problem. But I think personal rigidness versus expectations are, a little different. I'm trying to give you some wiggle room here, but I might be failing. But you have to. But I think you'll be all right. I think you're good. Anyone there want to offer some help to Reverend Ron? Maybe somebody that knows him, they can chime in on flexibility and rigidness, if it's causing dysfunction in his personal life or in his family life. Okay, that's a good answer. I like it. The silence is good. All right, well, we can go to the next slide. All right, so this is what we're talking about, expectations and mental health, right? So again, we got to take everything with, I won't say a grain of salt, but with some layers and with some level and with some nuance, right? So generally, research shows that unmet or unrealistic expectations can lead to feelings of failure, anxiety, depression. When we expect too much of ourselves or others, we set ourselves up for disappointment. And so this idea that we're talking about with expectations, again, somebody need to be at work on time, they need to be in work on time. Somebody's, showing up to be a part of this ministry or do this thing or do whatever, and we have expectations for time. That's one thing. But when we have, say we have an expectation for ourselves, and what if we have an issue with procrastination that we haven't dealt with, right? And when we find ourselves not achieving the goals, or not doing the things that we need to do because we haven't dealt with the procrastination issue we have, it could lead to feelings of failure and actual literal failure. Like procrastination can lead to literal failure, but also you can maybe do well, have an issue with procrastination that just makes you feel a certain way, and you can actually maybe be progressing on your job, or getting the grades that you want in college. I started most of my papers, regardless of how long they were or when they were due, probably an hour or two before they were due. I got A's. It set me up for failure because I always felt like, oh, I work my best when I'm under the gun. And instead of doing one page a day for 10 days and then do a 10-page paper, I just do it overnight and be tired the next day. But in life, I've learned that I can't live my life that way. And so when I started to see that things weren't working out the way I thought they would work, based on this model of procrastination I had, I did feel like a failure. But I was literally failing, but I was failing because I wasn't dealing with my procrastination and doing things in a way that made sense. Now we're talking about anxiety and depression, and we have unrealistic expectations for other people, for our bosses, for our spouses, for our children. That's when we talking about like the anxiety and depression, and things that kind of are more serious when it comes to our mental health and our well-being. Um, any questions there, comments, concerns on that? Any pushback? I'm with that as well. All right, we
Um,
can go on to the next
I
thing.
would say I
Go
definitely
ahead.
can attest to this, that it's been true for me. Um, experiencing feeling like all of those feelings of failure, anxiety, and depression from not as much of unmet expectations that I put on myself, but unmet expectations that like I allowed other people to put on me. And so I've learned how to draw boundaries. And sometimes people will still try to put their expectations like on me, but I'm okay now with saying no and not having to explain it, and okay now with saying like, okay, that's great that you feel that way, but that doesn't work for me, and keeping it moving. Like I've been learning over time how to keep my peace and how to set boundaries, and that I don't have to accept every expectation that someone else puts on me, regardless of who they are.
And I think that's a great example. I'm probably the bad guy in this situation because I become Scrooge as I've gotten older. But I really have wrestled with, the college I went to really put me in the mindset of like anti, what do you want to say, capitalism, anti commercialism, anti just doing stuff just to do stuff. And so it's bled over into like my life with my kids. We'll use an example when it comes to Christmas. I've literally been around people that will max out their credit cards and be broke because they have this expectation that they need to fulfill all their child's dreams, and they buy everything they possibly can and get everything that's on the Christmas list. And then it leads to problems with their finances, problem with their spouse. And when they can't buy those things, they feel like a failure. It can lead to anxiety and depression. And so there's a lot of space in which I feel like you're doing the right thing by having those boundaries and setting that line in the sand and saying, hey, I am not going to let other people's expectations that are unrealistic or go unmet by me to cause me dysfunction. But I've met too many people that have been offset by, especially like a Christmas holiday, when they couldn't get the stuff or they couldn't get what the kids wanted or they couldn't buy this or couldn't buy that. And it's just like, man, like at the end of the day, you're gonna have all these problems again with fear, with failure, anxiety, and depression based on you trying to meet this unrealistic expectation of getting everything on your kid's Christmas list. Hopefully that wasn't, I didn't step on anybody's toes, but I think in a certain extent we got to realize like some things are just beyond reach, some things are unrealistic, and some things just those expectations can't be met. And once we get into a good place of understanding, like, hey, I'm good. What I can do, I can do. What I can't do, I can't do. I'm gonna set that line, and that's what I'm gonna live by. And I'll maybe feel free to explain that to somebody. Sometimes I don't have to explain those things to anybody. But I think what you're saying is proper and right because if we don't set those boundaries, and if we don't draw that line, it can lead to a lot of issues with our well-being and or mental health. Any other questions there? Okay. And I'm not saying anybody that wants to buy me a Christmas gift don't. But if it causes you problems, I don't I don't want you to have those problems. But I welcome all gifts, and I definitely have shot myself in the foot a lot of times. Nobody buys me Christmas time. Be sad, but you got to stand on you got to stand 10 toes on what you believe in. So I just get sad. Anyway, so types of expectations. So there's self expectations. That's when we set standards for ourselves, and sometimes we have high standards for ourselves, and again, sometimes our standards are low for ourselves, right? And when we don't meet these expectations, when we set them high, we might feel shame, we might feel guilt, or worthlessness. And in that situation, a lot of times we lose self compassion because again we have these lofty goals. I think for me, as many of you will know that are here, maybe some of y'all online, when you watch later, I've been in school 40 years. I just told people that the other day. I've been in school for 40 years, and it looks like come August I might be done with school. And a lot of people that were in school with me, they got their high school diploma, they got their college degree. They went on and got their master's. They got their PhD, and some people that I know did that bang, 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 back to back. So when they were, in their mid 30s, whatever the case may be, they were done with all their education, several years into their career path, or whatever the case may be, and everything was going fine. For me, on the other hand, when I was fresh out of college, I decided to, buy motorcycles and take trips and do other things that didn't require a master's degree. And so when I decided to go ahead and get my master's degree, I was about 12 years out of college. Then I started that, took a little break, worked, started a new career. Then I said, you know what, there was other things at play, other people in my life that wanted me to finish my degree and things of that nature. I thought it was a good idea. So I got my master's degree, but I was well into my 30s. Then here I go again. Now I'm doing this PhD, and I'll be graduating with my PhD at the age of 45, right? And so for me, I have other people in my life that had different expectations for me and wanted me to be done sooner. And for me, I enjoyed my life. I had, I did the things that I wanted to do. I don't feel like I missed out on anything. But if I was the type of person that um, had shame and guilt behind the decisions I made that led me to being in school for 40 years, then it could cause me some type of dysfunction. It could cause me to be upset, to feel guilty, all this have shame and all those type of things. And so that kind of spills into the next bullet point of expectations of others. It can be expectations of others, expectations from others, expectations for others. But the idea here is expectations of others. We often expect certain behaviors from family, from friends, church members, other groups that we're in, neighbors, and when they don't meet those expectations, we can feel hurt or angry. And again, having the wrong expectation, or when people don't meet our expectations, or having too high of expectations in some situations, can lead to us feeling hurt or angry when those people don't meet those expectations. And for that, communication and forgiveness is the key. Because again, if you're not communicating your expectations of others, they won't know your expectations, and so when they don't meet them, they're
Hi.
going to be
Oh,
confused as why you
do
told
you
them.
know where stick pins are? Hmm.
I do not know. Um,
They're little straight pins that you maybe keep your seams in order so you can.
I think that might be, yeah, you got it. And so again, you could be giving a talk on Zoom and have the expectation that people's mic won't turn on. Then you get be all bent out of shape when it happens, right? So if you're not so rigid and you're flexible, when that happens, you can just keep it moving, right? It's not a big deal. Life goes on, and sometimes buttons get pushed, right? But again, with expectations for others, communication, 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 and forgiveness. Those have to be the things that are like, one and two that are our go-to when it comes to expectations for others. And then there's other things, societal, church and faith expectations, and society and our faith, our our faith, and our faith communities can both set high bars, and sometimes can expect people to be perfect. And when we don't meet those expectations, or when again, if by this age you're supposed to have this, by this age you're supposed to have that, when society teaches that and we don't meet those things, it could cause us to have some kind of personal, again, anxiety, depression, fear, feel like a failure, all those type of things. And I think sometimes we can see, especially in the generation now where everybody likes to put on social media their best days ever, and nobody puts on social. Well, some people do, but generally people aren't like, "Oh, I failed today. Today was terrible. Oh, I made a mistake. Oh, I cussed out my kids." People generally don't do that unless they're looking for sympathy or clout or something like that. But in this climate that we live in now, we're getting so many messages of perfection. Of perfection. Every day is great. I was a millionaire by the age I was 20. Da 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 da. And so those things become the opposite. They can be not inspiring, and they can make us feel like we're less than, or we can feel overwhelmed, or we can feel isolated when we see that everybody else is doing something and we don't measure up, and they're always out of town, they're always on vacation, their life is so good. And so when we let society shape our expectations that aren't healthy, it could lead to distress for us. Any comments, questions, concerns there? Okay, we slide to the next slide and talk briefly about the pressure to be perfect. And the idea here is for perfectionism is a refusal to accept any standard short of perfection. Now, again, we're not talking about rigid, we're not talking about flexible, we're talking about perfection. And there are actually people that walk around. I was a part of a faith community a long time ago that taught that nobody sinned, nobody fell short. You can be perfect, you can do this, you can do that. And when somebody messed up, or when somebody didn't meet the leader's expectations, they would just berated, and they would get berated publicly. They might get berated in the Bible study. They might get berated in a sermon. You know what I mean? It was a lot of like, because of this faith community taught that that perfection was achievable and everybody should be perfect. And there was also a lot of people not being, well, I don't want to get to the next part, but there's a lot of people just front and faking and putting on these airs of everything was okay when they were really broken. They were really hurting. They were really beat down. But because of this faith community taught that perfection was the way and that was the only way to be. And if you weren't perfect, you were a problem and something was wrong with you and you were broken, and you were evil. It was a very rough place to be in. And so it happens outside of those type of circles. It can happen at work. It can happen for parents and their children. It can happen for spouses. Like it's a thing that we have to be very careful not to let perfectionism creep into our everyday life. And it's a lot of pressure for a lot of people. Even children, they have a fear sometimes, or they have a fear of not getting those A's, because they feel like they're going to let us down as parents, or things of that nature. And perfectionism is a common struggle, and it can lead to anxiety. It can lead to burnout, and it can lead to hiding our true selves. And when I speak of anxiety, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. But burnout, a lot of people don't realize that, hey, when you're, say your job, say you're a counselor, and you have this expectation, or the self-imposed expectation, that everything that you always say in your counseling session is always going to be the right thing, it's always going to be perfect, it's always going to change somebody's lives. And when you see that that's not happening, and you don't realize, like, hey, people make choices, and you can have great conversations, and your sessions could go well, but they can leave your session and do the exact opposite of everything you talked about doing. But that's not on you. But if you have that personality, and if you have that way of thinking about your job, when it doesn't happen, um, the way that you think it should, it can lead to burnout. And then also hiding our true selves, as I mentioned before, when you're walking in the space of work or church or faith group or your neighborhood association or your community group or whatever, or as a parent, if you're walking in this perfection and want people to see you as perfect all the time, you might be hiding your true self. And that's not to say that maybe your true self is the punch people out and, honk at them when they're crossing the street if they take too long. But just like there's a part of you that can't be free to be who you are, when you're walking in this way of perfectionism. And it could lead to anxiety, it could lead to depression, it could lead to all these different things. So um, I don't think enough people spend time assessing where perfectionism may play a part in their daily lives and where it could be creating a source of stress for them. Any questions there?
Yeah. So I'm sorry. So so I think a better way for me. I got to go back and find out where I was. I pressed the wrong space bar.
Okay,
I think
no problem.
a better way for me to get it, which I did while you were just talking, was
Hmm.
which I think that I practice pretty good. Even though I have real high expectations, I have expectations over things that I can't control. And so
Mm,
if I can't control it, I don't get too caught up in it. But if it's something that I can control, or something that I can do something to um, to to help meet that expectation. Those are the things that I kind of really invest energy in. I there are things that, even though I have high expectations, it's over things that I can control.
and I think that's smart and that's safe. I mean, when we are trying to manage and set and keep expectation for things that we can't control, I feel like that could be problematic. And so I think I think there's wisdom that's involved when it comes to what you can control and versus what you can't control. And again, if anyone finds themselves having these expectations for things that they can't control, generally that's probably going to lead to some sort of disconnect, some kind of frustration, some kind of anger, some kind of whatever. Um, Especially if these are people in your life that you see every day, things of that nature. But I think there's also room for, like, hey, um, even if there are things that you can control and you have expectations, just making sure that um, regardless of rigidity and all the stuff we talked about before, just making sure that those expectations that you have for the things that you can control don't lead you to be distressed. For instance, if you're, say you're amongst a group of people, and you're leading them, and there's 10 people, all of them have two hands, 2 feet, and they're able to do something, and nobody will step up to the plate and do something. If your expectation for them is to help you out and they don't help you out, and at least in frustration, okay, that that's fair. But if you start doing things to cover for those things that they should be doing, and it leads to burnout, or at least you breaking your back, or at least you being sick, or at least you not being sleep, then I think that's where expectations can there's room for change, or where we can figure out how you can do something different. If yeah, I can control the situation by doing it all myself, or not even expecting people to show up, or just telling people to stay home and I do it all myself. Not saying that you do that. I'm saying in general for people, that when you have those type of spaces where you can control, but that control leads to problems for you physically, spiritually, mentally, or whatever, health wise, then that could be where the problematic nature comes in. But I think there's wisdom in setting expectations for things that you can control, and then as well as things that you can't control.
I'll tell a little joke. I see somebody in the chat on Facebook making comments. So I'm gonna tell a little joke
Mm-hmm.
about him. He worked for me
Okay.
when I was a pastor of another church. He was a custodian,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
but he wasn't very let's say he wasn't very custodial, and and so we we would try to try to encourage. I mean, he was real good at telling jokes, but not really great at being a custodian, which I'd hired him to be. And
Uh-huh.
and so he had to go to the hospital one day, and because I was compassionate, I went and visited him in the hospital. And but because he wasn't very custodial, what I did was I told him, I said, hey, I really want you to take good care of yourself, and so I'm going to pay you for the rest of the month. But then we don't need you to be a custodian anymore. And and he didn't realize it until after I left that he had gotten fired. He was happy because he got a whole month worth of payments. And and so he called me. He was like, did you just fire me? But I could control that. And so instead of me getting frustrated and mad because he wasn't custodial and ruining the friendship,
Mhm,
that was under my control.
mhm,
And so, gave him a little extra money
mhm.
that he didn't have to work for. He wasn't really working for the other money anyway. And then, but I had control over who was the custodian. And so I'm sure he'll make a comment in things soon. But that was something that was under my control, but I didn't have to become anxious over it because I had some kind of
Mhm,
control in that situation.
mhm. Now that's perfect. That's perfect. You had an expectation for the custodian to be custodial. When they didn't meet that expectation, you were generous enough to let them get a couple weeks of pay, and let them go on about the business so they can perform in their stand-up comedy. I understand. It works. It works. Oh, Kier, I see your hand.
Yeah, that's funny. Um, it's two things came to my mind. So let's see. So the first one I'll share is I remember I used to get frustrated with my kids, and then you know about them just kind of like making a mess and doing all this stuff. Um, but then I started just getting them to help me with everything. And I started realizing like these kids are way more capable than I gave them credit for. Like even Jay, the 3-year-old, like I will get Jay to put like he can reach the drawer with the knives and the spoons and the forks and everything. So I would get him to lay out all the utensils and get my other kids to put out the cups and put the plates. And now my two oldest kids, they know how to wash dishes, dry and put them up. And so I used to get kind of like frustrated at like how much needed to be done and how it seemed like, man, I just cleaned up and everything's all super messy again. But now I really been learning to get them to pull their part. And I was even telling Bella, I gotta teach her how to cook a meal. She knows how to make, that like eggs, like boil them and do all that by herself. So I'm like, now I gotta teach her, how to make a full on like actual dinner. And then as they get older, I have the thought process of like, you know, each person will have a day. This is your day to prepare dinner for the family instead of it just kind of being all on one person. Like we, all carry the weight together. and just teaching them how to cook and clean and just, help take care of the house. And I know Cody was feeling kind of overwhelmed at one point with the yard work. And I sat right on that porch and I was like, Seth and Jay, y'all put them leaves and pine needles in the bag. And when Cody came home, he seen all the stuff in the bag. I'm like, Seth and Jay did it. So I'm like, we don't have to do, everything. Like even little kids can really accomplish a lot. So I think it's so important that we like recognize when we're feeling overwhelmed or frustrated, and then we reassess that plan, whether it be if a spouse is asking you to do things or have expectations. I love the calendar because then you put stuff on the calendar, you see how much time stuff really takes, and then you can show somebody like, hey, this is the calendar, what should I take off? What do you want me to take
Mhm.
off? And then there could be like a realistic view of like what can I actually do with my time. And then I don't know if this connects, but it just made me think about it. I I was did a Bible study a couple days ago on a story about the son who left and spent his father's fortune, and was eating with the pigs and just kind of like wasted all. And then when he came back, his brother was frustrated. He had these expectations and he was frustrated, like, wait, why are you celebrating him? You done gave him a robe, the sandals, the signet ring. And then but what it showed me was how much God loves me, and just how much God loves people, and just really looking at that story of what that would look like today, and how the Father represents God. So I just think that people's expectation comes from their perception of reality. And I think the person who has like a very healthy view of how God loves them and like just a very healthy view on life, I think that they will have healthy expectations. They will see people and situations in a healthy way. I think you basically said that at the beginning. So I think if we find ourselves experiencing the negative, the burnout, anxiety, stress, and all those things, we might need to go back and look at what is the story that we are telling ourselves about life, about God, about relationships, and then we get those stories right. Those right thoughts should flow into good beliefs, which flow into good actions, which flow into good results.
100%. I agree, and that segues perfect into the next slide, 2 slides from here, the power of community, right? Um, and one thing I've learned about expectations is that I'll give you an example. How I manage. Well, let's go to the next slide, the one after that, the power of community. Um, so I'm gonna tell the story. So when I think about the power of community and how community can help, sometimes your community can help you see things. Sometimes you can have conversation with community and they can help you understand things. And sometimes just watching what you're a part of, what the community have going on, what people are doing and what they're not doing can also help you with your expectations. And so uh, when I'm having conversation with people, when I'm meeting with clients, um, the biggest thing, and I might have mentioned it before, when people are frustrated about things, upset about things, mad at their spouse, mad at the kids, mad at the world, mad at their job, is that they're unable to um, manage their expectations better. They're unable to change their expectations, or they're unable to remove the expectations that they have that shouldn't be there. And the example that I use is that for me, so some of you may know that I'm the chicken king. I'm not the king. I'm the chicken champ. I'm working way up to be the chicken king. So I raise chickens. I do some things. So in my backyard, I have set up a palace for my chickens. They have 2 separate coops. They can go in either one they choose. They can stay on the top floor. They can be on the bottom floor. They can lay eggs here, lay eggs there. They also have a cage outside of those coops that allows them to, if I can't let them out that day, they can still get out, stretch their legs like being on the prison yard. They can still hit the yard, even if I can't let them out for freedom. Then I also, throughout the day, I let them do their thing in a free range, right? And so for about a month or two, a couple months back, I would come home. I got chickens down the street. I got chickens in the neighbor's house. I got chickens on the roof. I got chickens everywhere. They're everywhere with but where they're supposed to be. My expectation for them was like, hey, I'm providing you with everything. I'm providing you with a roof over your head. I'm providing you with the finest victuals. You eat good food. I'm every day. I'm chopping up. I'm chopping up as a grown man
Not basis.
for
Oh,
chickens. I'm chopping up peppers. I'm chopping up cucumbers. I'm seasoning the vegetables with oregano and what is
this
it
this shit was said.
pepper and all these different things. They food tastes good. They eating better than I am. You know, they're having a salad fresh every morning. And when I said to myself, I had this expectation that they would be home every night, that they would stay put, that they wouldn't wander. But what I realized, you can't keep a chicken that don't want to be kept. So I had to adjust my expectations and understand that no matter what I provided, what shelter I provided, fresh water, the best food, the best living arrangements, they decided that the grass was greener in the neighbor's yard. They decided that walking down the street and almost getting hit by cars was better for them. So I had to manage my expectations. I had to change my expectations and I had to remove my expectations. At the end of the day, you can't keep a chicken that don't want to be kept. And so that has helped me understand life in general. Hey man, with certain people, certain situations, with certain things, you can't make a chicken into a but anyway, that's a whole nother situation. But you just at the end of the day, you gotta understand what you got going on. And you gotta make sure that hey, when we have expectations, if we find that our expectations for our kids, for our spouse, for our loved ones, for our communities, even that, I have so many expectations for our communities, for us as a, I get disappointed every day. But I have to understand my rules, my codes, my morals, my values aren't the same as everybody else's, right? And so I can't get so bent out of shape and so frustrated with what other people are doing that it knocks me off or my tilt or it keeps me from doing the things I need to do. But through community, whether community is my wife, whether community is my kids, whether community is church, whether community is other people that I hang out with, community can help you manage, change, or remove expectations. They can also share in your struggles, and they can also help with reducing shame and bring forth healing. And oftentimes the Bible is pretty clear, confess one to each other so that you can be forgiven sins. And I think even beyond just the forgiven sins part, when you confess, it allows you to be free from that thing that is holding you down. Right. And so if we have a struggle, if we're working through things or we got stuff that's going on where we're having the wrong expectations or need to change our expectations or remove our expectations, community is a great way to kind of help manage those things. But also you got to be wise in who you share your business with and who you talk to and all those type of things as well. But the point is that overcoming expectations, managing expectations, changing expectations is not something that has to be done on an island. You can get feedback, you can talk to people, you can have conversations, and that way maybe changing, managing, or removing expectations can be done in a healthy way. Um, any questions, any comments, concerns about the power of
Yeah, I think I'm going to add that little piece right there into my postmarital counseling. I won't do it into the premarital, but my postmarital counseling. Every chicken. I got you. I got it. I got it.
all right, all right, all right. Like, yeah, you can't make a chicken.
Yeah.
But hey, listen, again, if the expectation is I need you to be here, I want you to stay here, I make it nice and comfortable, chickens that are like people. They still may wander off. You know what I'm saying? So we got to be mindful of the wandering and why they're wandering and what can we do to keep the wandering from happening. Well, we got a few minutes and I got some more slides and I think this is me again with my part twos. But I don't want to. Let me see. Uh, let me see. Should I jump into that? No. Okay, we can do this last slide, and then we'll have any closing comments, and then we'll continue this next month. It's funny as a therapist, I'm supposed to work myself out of a job, but I find myself in these conversations needing to have a part two and a part three. And I don't know if it's self conscious of me trying to make sure that people keep coming back, or that I keep a job here at Greater Bethel. But trust me, I'm not doing this on purpose. But I do see a hand up before I go to the slide. I think there's one.
That's,
Dr. Parker, is that your
that's
name?
Dr. Parker. I just want to know who is JK. JK says you can't keep a chicken that don't want to be kept. Don't want to be kept. And so I was trying to remember what you said. And so JK, I appreciate you. I'm gonna write that down. It might actually be a sermon. All right, go ahead, Dr. Parker.
All right, all right.
I was gonna share a story about a time that I had an expectation where I tried to make somebody something that they wasn't, and then I got happier when I just was better when I stopped. Can I do that? But it's about
You have limited time, but
yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, limited
We'll
2 minutes.
allow it. We'll allow it.
So
No, go ahead. Just kidding. Just kidding. We'll allow it. Take your time.
maybe some of the expectations I saw,
made for my parents is that I would get wined and dined and treated like a queen whenever I got married, you know? And especially
Mm.
like on
Mm,
Valentine's Day, because Valentine's
Mm.
Day is the day where, it's a commercial holiday where, you get all the flowers and all the stuff, and I had been hanging out with my
mm,
girlfriends before. So I'm like, oh, I got a man now, a husband. It's about to be lit. And then I didn't realize that, he talks about the non-commercial, like not doing things just because, what was it? Just because everybody else did it. These are man-made
Oh,
holidays, but I
yeah,
didn't
yeah,
understand that, and I had a
yeah.
very high expectation, so I was very angry,
mm,
probably for like maybe 1 to 2 years. But then I
mm,
realized that I could do my own things and make myself very, very happy on my Valentine's Day, and with that, I
mm,
think it brought a lot of a lot of peace to me. And he was already at peace because
mm,
he had the, his principles, he's very principled.
Right.
And so then I became at peace and I was like, you know what, this is a man-made holiday. I really don't need much. And
Mm.
so, or I can do what I want to do for myself. And so I
Mm.
feel like that was the way that it kind of brought peace to me, took away some anxiety and anger,
mm,
and allowed us to understand, allow me to understand better.
mm,
Oh, so sounds
mm.
like she has some flexibility.
It took some
Yes,
Wow.
years.
yes, she was not rigid.
Wow.
It took some
Wow.
years for the
Wow.
flexibility.
Mm. Look at God. Ain't God faithful? Won't he do it? Won't he do it? All of your troubles, cast your cares on him. All those woes, all those things that were wearing, the burdens that you had for this Valentine's Day, God was faithful to deliver you from those shackles. And you know what? He chose a willing vessel. He chose a willing vessel that was right in your own home, that was willing to see you through and to help you break that curse. Look at God. Look at God. Look at God. And you know what? I don't even have to go into the next slide. We'll save that for next time. But the next slide talks about when expectations hurt. You know what I'm saying? Unrealistic or unspoken expectations and what they can do for people. And you know what? Thank God for communication because I believe Dr. Parker's husband now understands the value in holidays, regardless of how
Mm.
they started, regardless
Mm.
of what they do, regardless of them being man made. There is value in saying, you know what, said person, this is the day that we as a nation come together to celebrate love. We
Mm.
come together to say, you know what, honey? You are
Mm.
amazing. Look
Mm.
what God has given me, the wife of my youth that I can drink from my own cistern. Lord, I thank
Mm.
you. And that's an amazing thing. And look at that. It works both ways. You've been
Mm.
delivered from the burden of having to have that pressure of like, hey, I want this thing. And God has now allowed your spouse to see the error in his ways. And he wants to celebrate you as often as he possibly can. Won't he do it? Won't he
Mm.
do it? Won't he do it? My God, my God. Now there's a hand, JK. I don't know if you had a question or if you just wanted to, give me a high five. But if you have a question, I'm more than happy to give you a few moments before we cut out.
Just a little comment. I got married on Valentine's Day because, I said, man, if we gonna celebrate love, we might well really celebrate love. So, my
Mm.
wife wanted to celebrate Valentine's Day, and I said, you know what? You want to celebrate, then that's when we gonna celebrate our love. And so I just proposed and got married that day, and said I'm not gonna have to celebrate Valentine's Day because I'm gonna celebrate my wife.
Wow.
Okay.
Look, that's wisdom. That's wisdom, sir. I wish I had known you at the time I was, or whoever Dr. Parker's husband is, at the time that those decisions were being made by Valentine's Day. Boy, if that wisdom had been imparted, that could have saved a lot of turmoil, I think, for Dr. Parker. But thank you, JK. I really appreciate that insight, and it makes sense, right? If we have expectations that we know that people are going to have, let's meet those expectations in a way that makes sense for everybody. I think that's the perfect segue on our way out of here. Any comments, questions, concerns about so far about managing expectations, frustrations, the good, the bad, the ugly when it comes to frustrations before we get out of here? Any final thoughts?
No, I think it was a hen-filled conversation, and I'm I'm rooster happy. So yeah, it was good.
Listen, Rooster Happy. I think that's got to go in the sermon too. I think I need to write that down somewhere myself. I'm gonna put it in the chat
Mm.
so I can remember. Uh, when y'all hear keeping these shakers, you got to be Rooster Happy. All right. Well, I thank you, everybody. Looking forward to our next conversation. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, there's Reverend Ron Walls has an email address. You can send all of those to him. He'd be happy to sit down with you and talk about Valentine's Day expectations or anything else that exists. If he can't handle it, he can pass it off to me. But I'm sure he's the man that can definitely take care of those things. But I appreciate everybody that came through today.
All right, so wonderful conversation. Want to thank everybody for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you. Our Real Talk Bible study is in person tomorrow, but we will still offer the on the virtual conversation for Bible study, and then we have our men's retreat, Sons of Valor retreat, Thursday through Saturday. So look forward to a wonderful week. God bless you, and have a great one.
Good night, everyone.